these kinds of dwellings and centers of civilizations seem to have always risen up in a place where there is some sort of high strangeness. There's something. Now, I'm going to say that there are portals or vortices. There are openings that could be probably very likely have been the places where interdimensional beings or people from other places, intelligences, have been able to come in and out and maybe at some point in time interacted with those peoples. Because I think that either the Puebloans were very, very intelligent people, capable of engineering feats well beyond anything that not modern archaeology could even begin to fathom.
Welcome back after a long hiatus. We have Dr. David Morehouse. Dave, always good to see you. By the way, happy birthday. You're 20 years young and looking great.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I feel good. I feel young. You know?
That's right.
For a 70-year-old man, Jesus, golly. Yeah, hard to believe. I was surprised I made it this far.
Well, yeah. When you kind of revealed the remote viewing program, that was.
You wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, still here. Yes, yeah.
All right. So today we're gonna kind of go through your theories on why a lot of these paranormal hotspots, if you want to call it that, like Skinwalker, Rocky Mountain Ranch, Taos, and a number of others, are the way they. What's going on there? Just theories, having been to some of them, obviously. Chaco Canyon, kind of is another one. Mm-hmm. So let's start with that.
Well, I really enjoy doing the history, work with the History Channel because they're just a good bunch of folks, and I enjoy what they're doing. And they're bringing a lot of this, what, of course, they call high strangeness. I just would usually would call it, outside of the framework of working with them, just anomalous, activity going on. I know that there's a real strong push towards UFO, UAP, whatever they want to call them, and alien life and all that kind of stuff. And I know that at least beyond Skinwalker Ranch and even Skinwalker Ranch, I think Skinwalker Ranch, more so than beyond Skinwalker Ranch, was just kind of focused on just describing this high strangeness and putting as many scientific tests and experiments as they could, and then being able to say, well, this shouldn't have happened, or I don't know what's happening here, or anything else. And just getting its legs beyond Skinwalker Ranch is wonderfully produced and has an excellent director and an excellent team. And, Andy Bustamante and, of course, Paul, smart young guys and, capable, and they think really well on their feet. And I really like those guys. And it's interesting to see that their expertise as investigators and the kinds of things that they're asking and doing is kind of opening beyond Skinwalker Ranch now into just, they're getting deeper and deeper. And they're not afraid to step outside the framework that was kind of established for them, which that this has to be high strangeness as kind of defined as aliens and, portals and UFOs and that kind of stuff. And they're understanding now that this high strangeness can fall into different categories. It can not be extraterrestrial. It could be us. It could also be paranormal, which enters into a whole new understanding, or opening up of things. And the concern I know for the producer and director in particular for Beyond Skinwalker Ranch is, we're not a ghost show. So we don't want to do ghost stuff. But as they found out in the Taos Ranch, we love you guys, but, too freaking bad, because this place is haunted. You know, it's like all remote viewers working the thing, which I love it because it gives them, an understanding of stuff, and their team really gets it and understands it, and they appreciate it. When you get 70 remote viewers providing data at the scale at which it's being provided, or if you have 50 providing data and the scale at which it's being provided, to them, it's like, whoa, this is cool. It doesn't answer the questions, it answers them in such that it gives them an idea of what this could be, because it's stuff you cannot glean through your instrumentation, right? But it's data that could be correlated data that can be used to offer some potential explanation. And I love the fact that you're seeing like Travis and Eric and Paul and Andrew all accepting of that. They're not going like, oh, well, this is it, which I'd be aghast if they did that. I would say, no, you can't. Please don't do that, because now you're saying that our interpretation of this is precise and 100% accurate. And I love the fact that they get that it's not 100% accurate, but is highly correlated data coming from in the blind from people operating independently across the United States and 4 other countries or 5 other countries or 3 other countries, and all being pulled together, correlated, and then presented. So it helps there to offer things. And especially for the Taos Ranch, it came up as that this place was a really dark energy and a presence there.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at Baen.com.
But let's just review some of the bidding of this whole area here. I think what's most important for us to understand is that when you look at this particular area, there's huge evidence of ancient civilizations. Mm-hmm. Huge evidence of ancient civilizations, of powerful civilizations that were influenced technologically by something that you can't prove or disprove, but in the fact that, like Pueblo Alto, Pueblo Bonito, Chaco Canyon, that you hear archaeologists coming up with these theories of what that place is and why it was, which I think are just completely wrong. But that's just my opinion. I really have a bone to pick with most archaeologists, because it's kind of an elitist perspective where if you were taught by somebody, how to interpret this, that you carry that forward and you don't branch out on your own and come up with new interpretations, because you come up with new interpretations, you get shut down by the old guard. And that just perpetuates all the way through. So we never get really free forward thinking about what things might be. Taking Chaco Canyon, or even just taking like the civilizations, the Aztecs, the Incans. And if you go into the Incans, you have archaeology stands there flat-footed today and goes, yeah, well, they didn't have the wheel. Are you kidding me? They didn't have the wheel? They didn't have the wheel. Then why do they have 30-foot and wider road beds that are engineered with engineered curves that have the same kind of beveling in the curve that we have on our interstates, and our roads today? They must have really been hauling ass in their Huarache sandals, and beating the shit out of that mule as they were riding it, because they weren't in a cart, because they didn't have wheels. couldn't think of those, of course, but they could build those massive structures like Machu Picchu and, Sacsayhuaman and all the others that, hundreds of places that are there, and yet move big stones without even the smarts to figure out how to build a wheel. It's just ridiculous to make a statement like that. And then as every time they excavate a new thing, again, they see these ancient roads that were there 1,000 years before the Spaniards ever got there. And they had, as I said, engineered roads. They have 10-ton pillars that were clearly, like turned on some kind of a rock lathe, because they have the pinion points, tops and bottoms on them, on the ones that have fallen over. So clearly it was picked up and put on something and spun through some mechanism for them to be able to run and cut it like you would if you were shaping, wood, I guess, but instead now in these heavy stones. And it just doesn't bear out to stand back and say they didn't have the wheel. It's just like looking at, going back to just the things that the British, exploratory society said about the civilizations in South America. They just drew these lines of they're savages and they couldn't have pots and pans. They don't know about pots and pans, or they didn't know how to make, cooking utensils and things like that. They just crapped in the jungle and, used their hands as forks. So, and I mean, they really thought this stuff.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
And if anybody came back and posited, a different explanation, they were refusing to accept it. So enough on that. The whole point is that, in the last 200 years, we continue to maintain these really closed off, often just buffoonish and somewhat ignorant, interpretations of what happened here in the last 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, in and around, our country and others. So I think it's just impossible to think that in Chaco Canyon, the Anasazi, which now you're supposed to change that because Anasazi, as I've said, means, ancient enemy. And so now the Puebloans want to call them Puebloan ancestors. So you call them whatever you want to call them. I'm calling them Anasazi. So they're Anasazi, and unique potteries and their structures. So these people who didn't have the wheel lay structures out over kilometers that are purposely, and they are not within eyesight. So it's not like somebody's, telling, move the stone over that way, just a little bit further. Good. These things are over the hills, right? Over mountains or from in the canyon there, and kilometers apart. And they are now, when you survey them, they're like millimeters off from each other. And they are designed to be in perfect alignment for the sun and the moon and certain placements and other things, which you cannot be a people so ignorant engineering wise that you can't even have a wheel, right? Yet you're making kivas that are 180 feet in diameter or more or less, slightly less. And you are going 28 to 58 miles away and cutting down trees and then supposedly transporting those trees by using 200 Indians carrying a tree to go walk back 28 miles to go ahead and use it to build one pole in the top of the kiva, for the top of the kiva. So it's just preposterous that they would do that. And then they're looking at the circular kiva and nobody's smart enough to go like, well, what if we turned that this way? Or what about this big tree? What if we just cut it off here, and turned it into something? It's ridiculous to think that they were so ignorant that they couldn't do that, but yet they were intelligent enough that they could engineer an entire civilization that they know or believe that it actually conducted commerce with the Aztecs and quite possibly with the Incans from Chaco Canyon. That they engineered straight roads and actually had illumination points that would fire up at night so that you could navigate at night as well as during the day to get to travel. And they have found things that would have only come from Central or South America in and around that area, as they have found things in Central and South America which indicate that there had been trade or some commerce of some sort with, the Puebloans, the Aztecs. And when you look at places like, Pueblo Bonito, it was constructed to house somewhere around 3,000 to just under 4,000 people, yet it's estimated less than 500 ever lived there. Why? Why is that? Why would that happen? There are rooms that are completely sealed. I mean, completely sealed. It's not like they had a door and somebody sealed them up, 300 years ago or 1,000 years ago. They were gone almost in an instant. But their rooms they were constructed that way. So there's speculation. Was it done for cooling or insulation, or was it housing was it creating a place for something other than human to be present in there? And this whole long story is I'm telling it to you just because what I want you to understand is these kinds of dwellings and centers of civilizations seem to have always risen up in a place where there is some sort of high strangeness. There's something. Now, I'm going to say that there are portals or vortices. There are openings that could be probably very likely have been the places where interdimensional beings or people from other places, intelligences, have been able to come in and out and maybe at some point in time interacted with those peoples. Because I think that either the Puebloans were very, very intelligent people, capable of the engineering feats well beyond anything that not modern archaeology could even begin to fathom. We would have a challenge using modern surveying equipment to do that, but probably not that much of a challenge these days since it's all satellite driven. But anyway, it would still be a challenge to line up that many structures millimeters apart over that kind of distance. That would take some calculation. How did they learn to do that when they didn't have a wheel? And why were they taking and building this place, strange as it was, because they don't have the burial, they don't have the remains in the area. They don't have the trash mounds, which they find and dig through to figure it out. They don't have the trash mounds to indicate how, that there were thousands of people there. And it wasn't that it wasn't like an unfinished hotel, so they didn't have many guests. It was finished. And it was finished and it was there and they lived and they grew their crops and etc. And they hunted. And archaeology said, well, they misused the land. They didn't take care of it correctly. And so therefore the land became more arid. They lost the ability to plant more crops there. They destroyed their ecosystem. So it's called ecocide now. And this is archaeology now using the term ecocide because they're trying to parallel that to...
Yeah, it's all the rage, climate change.
All the rage.
It's all the rage.
Exactly.
Right.
So they're trying to parallel that into, the claims that we are engaged in ecocide. And then telling you, like you were just talking about, eating worms and, eating mealy worms and, grasshoppers because raising cattle is damaging, the atmosphere. And don't drive cars, only use electric cars. And if you don't believe that, we're just going to make it so you can't drive gas cars. We're going to outlaw them. And then you're going to have
which
to
effectively they're just making it so you can't drive because they won't have enough electricity to support the grid. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, that's all gonna fall by the wayside here. Trust me. It's people are becoming awakened and aware about what all that is and who's profiting from that, who's lining their pockets with that kind of stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous. But back to this story. So these great civilizations have come there and they've grown there without any real understanding as to why. And they've also become very powerful. I mean, if you talk to Puebloan shaman now, they will tell you stories that have been passed down from the ancestors that say that these places, particularly the Anasazi became dark and powerful. They could control the weather. So if you can be dark, powerful, and control the weather, I doubt that your power just caused your crops to dry up, right? So, archaeology says that that's what happened, but there's a University of New Mexico report that recently came out that completely refutes everything that modern archaeology is saying. And they're going like, there's absolutely no evidence that the rain dried up here or that the agriculture failed. There's absolutely no evidence that they didn't have the wheel. There's absolutely no evidence to support the predominance of claims by archaeology about what these things are. And as we've talked about before, these things that they were calling a sun dagger and saying, well, it's a calendar to show them the equinox. Well, you've got a Puebloan shaman that goes, that's not what that is. The spirals indicate transition. They indicate transformation. They indicate migration or movement from this world to another world, right? That's what that represents. And if you think about that, then when that sun dagger may have pointed to the center, perhaps that's the point at which they then look skyward, because that portal, which I, Mel, and Dame saw, opens, and something was coming at that time, over 1,000 years ago, that they were there, would come there and commune with them, maybe share and educate, train them, so give them some ideas. And yet, I think in kind of keeping with human nature, I have a sense that that power put them in a dark place and put them in a place where they began to exercise domination, dominion over other lesser peoples. And there is evidence of cannibalism there. There are rumors and legends of them becoming very much a warring people, of them, encroaching on and spreading out to take over bigger and more properties, more real estate, more people. And we've talked about this before. You look at these things of these indigenous peoples here and anywhere else in the world, those that are there, when in let's say in the 1500s, those that are there are the ones that were strong enough to kill all the others. They aren't there because they just sprung up out of the ground there and
were nice and peaceful before.
Yeah, peaceful, loving people, protecting, Mother Earth. They were dominant, fierce warriors that were not shy about, killing a lesser tribe to take their food stores, their furs, their women, to strengthen their own gene pool. They would do all those things. So stop feeling sorry for, the progress of humanity across time. It's been a story that's repeated itself since the beginning of time. It's how they survived since some estimates of 13,000 to 23,000 years ago. Coming, the Puebloans, the DNA is, Eastern Russia, all the way down into Africa. So you have the DNA from that coming all the way up and over and then spreading out into North America, all across North America, and even down further south. That's the origins of our species, of our race here. And so ours just came a different direction as we came in, as white people. But I just think that these places hold some sort of special meaning and have been inhabited by indigenous peoples because there's something powerful that draws them there. And they didn't stay there, and they don't weather the elements, and they don't, defend it and live in those places simply because they like the view. They do it because there's something to be gained by doing it, something to be learned. They don't just go there because the game is plentiful, because in some cases it's not. Yet they're willing to send hunt teams out farther to get it and to come back and to live there and exist there and build permanent dwellings with a link to the sky, right? In these places, a link to the sky. So if you look at these places, like you go to Skinwalker Ranch, then you go to, you start looking around to some of these other places like Bullfrog Ranch, which has a lot of other anomalous activity or high strangeness, right? It's only 23 miles to the northeast of Skinwalker. If you go to Rocky Mountain Ranch, which was done by Beyond Skinwalker, right? That's 230 miles northeast of Skinwalker Ranch. It's in Colorado, Rocky Mountains, Colorado. If you go to Taos Ranch, which is where we just finished the one that aired, I guess, about 4 weeks ago, which is a good one, that's 340 miles southeast of Skinwalker Ranch. Chaco Canyon is 310 miles southeast of Skinwalker Ranch. And Chaco Canyon is only 135 miles southwest of Taos Ranch. I mean, you getting this? It's like these are centers of activity where all of this high strangeness or paranormal activity is ongoing. You start looking at things, okay, now what could be drawing them there? Could it be, well, clearly everything that remote viewers have done is draw portals in the sky. Everything that they've done in their testing of firing rockets beyond Skinwalker and at Skinwalker has found places that they can't explain why when they shoot a rocket up, it hits something and deflects off, or it appears to hit something and deflect off. Or it goes up through something and everything electronic inside the rocket shuts down, right? Chute doesn't open, or all of the instrumentation that they have inside stops working, fails to work. They can't explain it. The Rocketeers can't explain it, and the scientists that are there, it's difficult to question the validity of the comments of either Eric or of, can't remember his name.
Travis.
Just flipped out of my head.
Travis?
Thank you. Sorry, Travis. Of Travis.
It's all right. He doesn't respond to my emails anyway. So.
Yeah. And Travis, 3 PhDs, astrophysicist. I mean, guy doesn't, neither he or Eric, they don't mince words. They're serious guys and they're serious scientists and they're serious thinkers. And they're like, geez, we shoot a laser beam up and it splits? I'm sorry, how do you explain that? But in Taos Ranch, same kinds of deals, right? They go to Taos Ranch, which now they were thinking like, okay, is it infiltrated with alien life and is it all that? No, and this is the important thing is that they're not trying to draw that as a conclusion anywhere. UAPs does not have to define alien, life. Could it be? Right. Something from another planet or another life that comes interdimensionally through a portal, appears in a port, comes out of a portal, is apparent in our physical world. It appears and then goes through another portal and disappears, and it's gone. Interdimensional travel, is that beyond the realm of explanation mathematically in physics? It is not. In fact, there are all sorts of explanations for that, and all sorts of mathematical proofs to support that. So that's a reasonable explanation, I think. It's also a reasonable explanation for understanding why indigenous peoples would begin to congregate in these places. It is also, I think, maybe one of the reasons why you don't see so much interaction personally. This is my speculation, okay, just my piecing it together in my head. Could be perhaps a tremendous disappointment in, having shared these kinds of wisdoms with this race of beings, this species on this planet, that every time they did, it rose up in some sort of corruptible power where it was used against all of the others. So exercising free agency, being driven by greed and some level of corruption, destroy everything else around you that's weaker, and sit proudly upon the throne as the supreme race in that particular place. It's happened in all of our recorded history and beyond that, it's happened. So I think maybe the interaction is not there anymore because it was an experiment that just seemed to go bad every time it was, engaged, which that would be the case. If we were doing that, that's what we would do. We would turn around and go like, okay, no more. You don't use it properly, so we're not working with you on it. That's an explanation as to why these things died off and why they killed each other. You go up into New Mexico and you start to see like at Taos Ranch, ground soaked in blood at that place. It's like there's such an evil, dark presence there. It's like Jesus, and that's what the homeowner at that place was talking about. Like, this place is haunted.
Did you get a chance to go there?
No.
Okay.
What we did was none of the viewers got to go, and I didn't get to go. I went to Taos, but I stayed in a hotel. I was never taken out to the property. All of the remote viewing work was already done, but I was not taken to the property. Stayed in the hotel, and then Shannon and I were taken to, they're doing these bar scenes now. So you go in and the interview takes place in a bar because they want the local people around, that kind of thing. And that's all that happened. So that was the briefing that I gave to Paul and Andrew there, which they then shared with, Travis and Eric. And that's how that unfolds. I never see the property, but I'm aware of what's going on there. And interestingly enough, I don't know if I shared this before, but because of what they themselves were kind of feeling at the ranch, at Taos Ranch, they made arrangements for a shaman to come in and bless the entire crew, give the entire crew a blessing to protect them from whatever was present there. Now, these are people that are, not necessarily spiritual and, not outwardly, afraid of those kinds of things, yet it was significant enough of a feeling there that they asked to be blessed and protected.
Was this before they got there, or were they there for a day or two?
I'm not sure the exact timeline, but as I understood it, it was like after the first day that they were there, they stepped back because everybody kind of felt uneasy about some of the stuff that was going on there. And if you see the show, look, you got to watch it, but I want to share this with you. I mean, it is a freaky place. And this house that sat there had been without power for 4 months, and it didn't have any power when they were in there. They brought in, temporary lighting running by generators and stuff just to shoot, or shot low light, but it had no power in it, no heat, nothing. And so as they were going in the very first time, one of the guys that was kind of the expert in the area, kind of the briefer to them about what people were saying about the area, he starts getting heart palpitations and starts feeling really weird and can't walk in. I mean, you could look at that and go, I don't know about that. That seems kind of convenient, but hey, I wasn't there. I didn't take his blood pressure or, find out what his pulse rate was, but he got really affected by it and couldn't go in. Okay. So they go in, they look around, and it's kind of weird, but they come back out again. They start broadcasting, this iridium frequency, right? It's space to Earth. And
1.6 gigahertz, yeah. Right. The two frequencies.
They start broadcasting that, right. And they start playing an audio manifestation of that. So they take that frequency and they play it in an audio expression, right? Over big speakers. And then they're watching a spectrograph to see what's happening. And as they're doing it, they start to see this response that comes in that starts off small and then it shoots way up, and then they start turning off the audio, the frequency, and the other one is still there. Well, there's no explanation for that. If it came in as a response, where is it coming from? Is it some sort of an echo, continuing reverberation of what they were broadcasting? But then the next day they shoot a rocket up right above the structure, and the chute fails to open. And then they get another one and they redo it. The chute fails to open, but the instrumentation fails. And they get another one and they shoot that one up, and the instrumentation fails, again, but the chute opens and it comes down. And so they go collect this thing. And now the guy that's running the rocket, he has a handheld directional signal finder. So in other words, he's using that to find the rocket. Okay? That's the idea, because the rocket is sending out a GPS interrogation signal and transmitting it. And so he receives it and he can say, oh, it's this way 500 meters to go get it. But Andrew hauled ass across the snow as it was coming down to find it. So they went and found it, had a nice soft landing, and they pick it up. And then the guy standing right next to him with a direction finder goes, the GPS signal is coming from the house. And they're like, what? It's not coming from the rocket? No. He's like, no, it's coming from the house, like 550 meters away, which it was 550 meters away. And so they're like, what? And they shoulder the rocket and they follow the GPS signal, which is not coming from the rocket. It's still coming from the house. And they go all the way to the house, following the direction, and step up on the porch, open the door, and go in. And the guy's going, it's like 30 feet that way inside the house. And they are in there, and there's like nothing. There's no electricity. There's no instrumentation. There's nothing there, broadcasting anything. But the GPS signal has now been warped from not inside the rocket, but inside that structure. So when they briefed Travis on that, he was just like, he goes through the mechanism of how that would have to be done. He goes, it would have to have something to rebroadcast out of there. And of course, they're like, yeah, we get that, but there was nothing in there to rebroadcast, and there's no power in the house. And there's no instruments in there that we're not broadcasting. We were using it to find the rocket. So that's a very weird, very in-your-face, unexplainable kind of a thing. Except also in that and other areas, the viewers were drawing these portals, like one portal pouring energy into another portal, and the portal was being depicted as almost like a donut, right?
Or a strip.
Then Travis is like, oh my God, as he's being briefed on this, he's going, oh my God. He goes, this is freaking me out. And they pull up the donut this donut anomaly that they found using these LiDAR hits, right, around the Skinwalker Ranch. And he was noticeably shaken by the fact that now this same thing was being replicated over 2 other places by remote viewers. They were perceiving it and drawing them. So he says, that's freaking me out. That's really freaking me out. I love that. I really love that. Yeah, it's freaking me out to see that. So what are some other explanations for this other than, and why would there be paranormal activity in a place like that? In other words, like evil spirits. Because there's evil as there is benevolent, there's malevolent and benevolent spirit everywhere. Everywhere. It's just energy. And if you go to that law in thermodynamics, it says that energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? If there is a reason for it to hang around, either good or bad, it can hang around. And when you have things going on like that are unexplained and that science can't unravel and give you a reasonable explanation for it, you have to accept the fact that it's, these are not people out there that are doing sleight of hand or, some sort of trickery or BS to try to make you think that this is something cool. There's weird stuff happening in this area. And I'm trying to say it's one of the reasons why ancient civilizations, came to this and other places on the planet and existed there, because there was something they were feeding off of. Whether it was technology or whether it was awe in looking at the sky and seeing what was present there, or being called to it by some other beings. And also in these places that are filled with death and slaughter, and those places, some of those places were. Some of them were. And they are finding all the time across America, particularly up in the Dakotas. They have now found mass grave sites with, 500, 600, I think some up 750 men, women, and children, all systematically slaughtered by something, and thrown in mass graves. And it wasn't white men, doing that. The skeletal remains are 1,000 years old, 750 years old, that kind of thing. So the place is, it has a creepy feeling to it to be around there. which interests me. It's funny to me that it becomes these places that are highly sought after to live in by affluent people, right? Artists and other, they all want to congregate in these places, and I don't get it. I don't understand quite why, unless they're being called in by, maybe the same, frequency to go to this place. Like they sense some highly creative, seductive aspect of these places that, brings them in and tunes them up to do what they do. But the artist that lived at that ranch, at Taos Ranch, he and his wife were really quite miserable because they felt as if they were being constantly haunted or abducted or something else. And they're using she is the only survivor. He died in the bed there and was, it was so freaking funny too, because the remote viewers drew a bed with a rotten, moldy body in it. And apparently when he passed, he was there for quite a while before they actually found him, because the wife had refused to sleep in that house anymore. And she slept at a house that was like maybe 200 yards away. And yeah, he was there for a while. But she then, as soon as he passed away, she left and never went back to the place. She talks more about abductions and that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, her script will flip and it'll all be about senses of evil and a ghost and a massive evil. She talks about a demon and that kind of thing. So I don't know if it's just trying to fill the spectrum of possibility, because she's not trained in any of that. So I don't know if she's just trying to articulate a possibility to generate interest, or if she's, filling the spectrum of descriptions because she really doesn't know what to call any of it. But my sense in looking at the work the viewers produced was that this was a place definitely with portals and definitely with vortices and definitely with high levels of energy sweeping across this target site from above and below. And there is a Taos hum that is there as well, which is one of the things that they speculate that they might have triggered, was this Taos hum. Which is ELF, that can really affect you if you've ever been in the presence of that kind of stuff. It does make you quite nauseous and can vibrate like the aqueous and vitreous humor in your eyes. It can do a lot of different things. It screws up, the cochlea because of the fluids that are there. And so that was present there as well. It also happens to have the highest concentrations of radioactive gas there.
Oh, like radon?
It's the highest. It's like 5 times the national average. 5 times the national average. There are uranium mines all over the place, but as there are in all of that area, as you go down south, like, New Mexico, all coming on down, there are uranium mines and other kinds of mines. And if you go like up at Skinwalker Ranch, if you go up to Bullfrog Ranch, there are signs of ancient mines, like ancient mining. So take it back 1,000 years and ask yourself, okay, our fantasy, our vision of what indigenous peoples were 1,000 years ago is wearing animal skins and shooting bows and arrows to hunt with. And they were hunter-gatherers, nomadic, but all of a sudden here they're building these big structures. And why were they mining? I mean, who told them to mine? I mean, what did they think they got out of the mining? I mean, I know there's some obsidian in certain places, and I'm sure they probably mined for obsidian because it's good knives, spear tips, and, everything else.
Yeah, and that was a big Aztec thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But why at Bullfrog Ranch, 23 miles kind of northeast of Skinwalker, why were there signs of ancient mining, signs and symbols of ancient mining? So there may have been, maybe they were utilized by some other higher entity to do that mining for them, or encouraged to do it, or paid to do it, or forced to do it, right? And then if you didn't do it, they'd snuff you out or something. I don't know. But there are certainly deposits of that stuff all over the place. And, if you go to this Bullfrog Ranch, which is right next to Skinwalker Ranch, northeast, as I said, it has really high concentrations of iridium. And, iridium is like, what, $4,035 an ounce now. It's almost twice what gold is. And gold is $2,600 an ounce right now. And iridium is there. And then there's a lot of radon gas, a lot of uranium, all of these things. I don't know if those became part of ancient nuclear drives. I don't know.
Who knows? Right.
I don't. But all of those things are there, and they're all in that area. And there were high concentrations of ancient civilizations there, in as much as those civilizations could concentrate. And there seems to be an attractant, even to this day, in living there, that still is. There's this presence of high strangeness. So that's what I think really reasonable explanation is for some of what's going on there. Is there can be high concentrations of very rare earth metals, of radioactive metals, uranium and everything else that goes along in that realm. Radon gas is hugely high there. That one could say that could affect how people think, how they evolve over time, how they process, cognate, right? Mm-hmm. It could. I mean, you could get very sick from that, and it's a very slow sickness, slow in the oncoming, affecting the tissues, the organs, the brain, etc. It could be that as an explanation. That it could have been higher 1,000 years ago than it is now, but it's extraordinarily high now. There are obviously these portals, so there could have been interaction. And a lot of what we see today, as I shared with you, when we looked at the concentrations of UFO UAPs since 1948, right? Mm-hmm. That it increased exponentially with the advances in the space war, not the space race, but the space war, lifting body aircraft and, no visible means of propulsion, no visible control surfaces, no wings to speak of, because the body of the craft itself becomes the lifting body. And then even as, you and I were talking about, it's not going to be, anti-gravity drives are not something that's going to be in popular mechanics. Right. Nobody's going to tell you that. But have there been patents filed? Yes. And, I know that some people in the show that we did that talked about that, these critics coming in there going, these are really bad patents. Yeah, no shit. They're bad patents, which is how you're seeing them. That's why they're there. That's why they're posted on, at the U.S. Patent Service. You can look them up because they're no longer classified because they failed to meet the cut, but they are there. And if there's one of them there for you to see, if there are 4 or 5 of them all addressing the same issue and they're all in the clear sea, there are 40 or 50 of them that are still classified, that are still being funded and worked on. And that's the point we were trying to make and sharing that, not for your engineering criticism of whether or not you think that patent would have flown or not. It's like, come on, focus. So what we're talking about is, that if these things are in the clear as patents that were funded and are being worked on at whatever level, then understand that there are dozens of them that are still being funded and worked on, and they will work on them until they find another one that doesn't work, and then it'll go gray. It's no longer black; it goes gray. Then the patent will be available. You can see it. There'll be an article in Scientific American or something else talking about what they're working on. But those drives are there. All that stuff is there. And I think, you're seeing most of what you're seeing, a huge percentage of what you're seeing, probably 93% of what you're seeing is stuff that's been created by us, by us, for us. Or you're seeing, craft that are coming from somebody else involved in the space war. That's,
I hope it's not that.
My take. I always have a tough time with this this idea of alien races. I mean, I've said it so many times. It's like you would have to be an absolute buffoon to think that we're the only thing that exists in the known universe that eats food with a knife and fork, I guess. I don't know, it's a stupid example, right? But it's like to think that we're the highest intelligence in the known universe would be, that's a real reach. You got to have some ego to step forward and make that claim. It's just unsupportable. Makes no logical sense, no scientific sense, no mathematical sense, no statistical, sense whatsoever to make that claim. They may not look like us, walk like us. They may not breathe air, drink water, eat protein. Who knows what they exist on or what they look like or or how far along they are. But certainly they are out there. And certainly there has been some interaction by them with us. And why they don't interact with us now, I don't know. I gave you my opinion about that. I think we may have been a failed experiment for them, a failed involvement for us. And I don't believe that they are here. I think that's conspiracy. I don't believe, they're running governments or doing things like that. I just don't believe it. And I've never seen any evidence of that or anything to support that. Heard all the stories and everything else you can think of. And I also maintain this idea that, if they really, really wanted to make a presence known to humans, they'd land at a football stadium and step out and go, hey, take us to your leader, whatever leader that would be. So,
Yeah, I mean, who's running the government right now? It ain't Biden. It ain't Harris, because she's campaigning. So, who's running it? I don't know.
Yeah.
You?
Yeah, I mean, logic would tell me that everything has been shoring them up in the first place, over the last 4 years would be doing it. And, it's very seldom the individual, that's actually there is the person that's really powerful or strong enough or smart enough to control everything that is below them. It's all the underlings where those are the true halls of power, or the things that get manipulated and cranked and turned and twisted, down the hall and, 3 doors down somewhere. That's where stuff really gets warped. And most of the time, the person sitting in the big chair in the Oval Office, most of the time, not always, is a person that really ends up just from day to day being persuaded and manipulated by the people that are in those other places that control those kinds of things or that's what they do. I mean, that's really...
Yeah, I mean, they're doing it tops down to the American people. If you can do it tops down, you can do it bottoms up too.
Yeah.
You can feed if they're feeding everybody around us with shit, you can also feed the president with shit. How would he know?
Absolutely. You can. Absolutely. You can. And I mean, look at it. I mean, you have FBI directors that attempt to overthrow presidents, and you have, right? You have Department of Justice that, is...
Well, I mean, they did. They overthrew Nixon. They probably killed Kennedy. Well,
that was just the example I was going to make to what we're saying, yeah. Right? It's so, all of the underlings that were trying to manipulate Kennedy, one of the things that stood out about Kennedy was the fact that Kennedy wouldn't take it. He was like, no, we're not doing that. This is what we're going to do. And he had very few trusted agents around him, one being Bobby and, 2 being his chief of staff and probably a handful of others, but the vast majority of his cabinet or anywhere else, including the Pentagon, he would not trust or have anything to do with them. He knew that they were there and he had to utilize them, but he was definitely going to be in charge, and they killed him for it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they killed him for God knows what reasons, but they definitely, well, I don't know, definitely, but the fact that file is still sealed. How's that possible?
Well, look, Oliver Stone has done a bunch of that stuff. I mean, JFK, he based that primarily off of Jim Mars's book, Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy. Mm-hmm. But he has done, he won't give up on it. And I have to applaud him for that, because he has some pretty good in your face analysis of that stuff. And his last one that he did was of the assassination. just defies any kind of logic or explanation, and it really is troubling. I can't remember the name of the documentary, but everybody should watch it, because even if you believe half of it, you should be stunned, you know? Even if you only believe half of it, even if you only believe a quarter of it, you should be stunned and worried. But you should also understand that's what we've created. We have these entities within, federal government that run themselves and have no allegiance to anything else. And if you're a president and you step in and you don't start going, you're fired, you're gone, see ya, be gone in an hour, that kind of thing, and clean house, and really have a laundry list of people you intend to put in there because they will be loyal and they will be, they're not going to spend their days figuring out how they're going to undermine you as a sitting FBI director.
Well, some of them still do it from outside of power. I think wasn't it Dulles who was fired or something like that? And
well, he was the guy that sat on the
Warren
the commission to investigate the assassination. Which, if you understand how inappropriate that was, that guy was the former head of the CIA, and now he happens to be sitting on the Warren Commission, and he was apparently very vocal and very manipulative in there. And if you looked at the whole cast of characters that were brought in, it's kind of like the special committee investigating January 6th that was handpicked by a particular congresswoman and put in there. When you start to look at stuff like that, you're kind of like, that's not fair. That's not.
Well, admittedly, the Warren Commission was a little bit more subtle, whereas the
you had to be more finesse in those days. You couldn't be so overt in your predisposition to a conclusion, or that you're part of the problem, and so therefore you're going to steer a different direction.
Yeah, now you can just openly say we were never at war with East Asia. We were always at war with Oceania, right? Exactly. Or whatever.
Just outright lie. In those days, you had to be sneaky, and they were really sneaky. It's more aggressive and overt now. So,
yeah, because they don't care.
Don't protect the guy. Let him get shot. If you don't want the guy in office, don't protect him. Pass a negative narrative and then look the other way. Oh, those rooftops are 130 yards from the podium.
Yeah, without getting too much, how did anybody with a minute of tactical training would have identified that as on a range card and sector sketch? You would have been like, oh, we gotta put a TRP on that building, right? We gotta get some eyes on there, right?
Well, they by their training, I'm talking Secret Service, and they spend a lot of time training these people. They have an outer, a middle, and an inner ring of security. Okay. The outer, the middle, and the inner ring of security is, of course, terrain dependent and all those different barrier dependent, all that kind of stuff. And whether it's inside or it's outside. But when you're at a place that has a line of sight, which equates to those that are listening, a line of sight becomes an excellent field of fire, right? That you have an excellent line of fire to get to somebody, and it's a chain link fence that they said they were going to barricade, put the barrier material on it, so you couldn't. But they estimate somewhere between 250 to 350 people who did not go through a magnetometer, who were piled up around this chain link fence that were inside of 50 to 75 yards from the podium. And nobody checked them. They didn't even post anybody there to check them, to see if there was something weird happening. The local law enforcement, which were Pennsylvania State Police, or there were two local township police departments that were there. The tactical police, meaning police, not Secret Service, the tactical units, meaning sniper units, were under the direction of the Emergency Management Control Unit commander. So not a law enforcement guy. the guy that runs the emergency, coordinates the emergency, which would primarily, they do it for disaster preparedness and that kind of stuff, right? He's running the tactical unit. But all of the police units, from the PSP to the 2 police units that were there, they were there to work for the Secret Service. They took their orders from the Secret Service. When they did their walkthroughs and went through the tactical plan, they kept saying, you need to put somebody, you got these AGR buildings, whatever that stood for. You got these buildings out here that are, they're a perfect line of sight to the podium where the president's going to be. And you need to get somebody posted out here so somebody can't get up on the roof. Or you need to have somebody up on the roof. You probably should put some of your counter snipers up on the roof, or we should put people up on the roof. And the Secret Service said, we'll handle it. We got it. So you need to look at the congressional hearing, not at some of the other reports, because the congressional hearing, it's interesting to see that, because the law enforcement officers that are in there are, there's a pucker factor, okay? Because you're sitting in front of Congress and the American people at this point, and you know what went down, and you also know that the Secret Service attempted to throw you under the bus. So you better have your shit in one rucksack, and you better know what you're talking about, and you better have the timeline straight. And it just keeps pointing, everything that was done. And you've got congressmen and women that are just appalled at what they're hearing. Appalled at what they're hearing. How something like that could be allowed to happen when they knew that the Iranians were already trying to infiltrate assassins. They knew that they were recruiting assassins to kill Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump. And they knew that they were coming up through Mexico. Right? They knew that. And they knew that they were being funded and recorded. They knew that that threat existed. And yet they turn around and, in every instance failed. They had no interoperability of communications. Secret Service snipers, counter snipers, were told that there were radios. We've got radios for you guys. You got to come get the radios so you're on our TAC frequency. Nothing wrong with you having yours. You can talk to Secret Service, but you also need to hear from us. They never picked them up. They were told twice. Got the radios for you guys. Come on, man. Come pick them up. First, they told the Secret Service lead agent in charge of that site that they had them for him. Yeah, okay. You'll get them. And then they told the sniper team face to face, right over there, 25 yards, that we got radios for you guys. I guess you want us to go get them for you and turn them on, and you want us to pin them on you and everything else. They didn't get them. They didn't get the radios. They couldn't talk to anybody. Nobody could talk to anybody. How do you do that? You and I are military men. One of the first things you do when it's something like that is comm checks. And if you don't have comms, you don't cross the LD till you get comms, unless there's a really special reason why you have to. And there was no special reason why they had to do that. And every Secret Service agent, from years gone by, who are loyal to the mission of protection of that principle, have said, if I couldn't talk to everybody, we would have made him stay in the building until we could. Or if somebody took a picture of this guy, which they did, and they took pictures of him. They had pictures of him walking around, and they had pictures, and he was a suspect for an hour or more before anything even happened. They had pictures of him. They had people that were taking pictures of him up on the roof and screaming to Secret Service agents and anybody else that there's a guy up on the roof. He's got a gun. And no reaction, nothing. Nobody does anything. It's unconscionable. I don't know where you would start firing, but what I would do is start with the tactical commander on the ground there and any other lead agent, including the lead sniper, who didn't go get radios when he was told twice that the radios were available. And I'd start firing them, and I would work my way all the way up to even the acting director, who, the first one, that stood up in arrogance and refused to answer questions. gone the next day, resigned because she knew she was going to be fired. And I would work my way up the chain until I fired the acting director. Why? Because he said, we accept all blame. It's our responsibility. But then he turned around and tried to throw local law enforcement under the bus. The Pennsylvania State Police and these two, small municipal tactical forces that were there. They said that the Secret Service didn't even tell them where to deploy snipers. They said, well, where do you want us to go? You guys sort it out. Yeah, this is your turf. We got our program here. We've got our area of security. You guys do what you want to do, kind of thing. Are you kidding me? So the guys were like, okay, well, what do we do? What we normally do, we're just municipal. We're just
even just soft. They put one of their guys on a building that the Secret Service might, without communication and without coordination, might assume that's a sniper trying to go after the president. Right?
Very well could. And the police forces got up. Usually snipers are deployed, into the inner, or let's say the as I said, you got the outer, the middle, and the inner security circle. Usually they're deployed to the inner circle and they face out. Their potential targets are outside the inner, so they are looking over the levels, the rings of security. And that's the way we would do it as well if we were, defending something. But instead, the police officers, because for lack of any other kind of guidance, they're not trained in how to establish a defensive perimeter or how to protect, a former president of the United States. So you know what they did? They deployed to high ground where they could, and they pointed their weapons into the crowd. And they surveyed the crowd thinking, well, I guess I'm just supposed to be looking for anybody who's in the crowd, who's gone through a magnetometer, who might, put together some sort of special bow and arrow or what the fuck, and shoot the president with it. That's what they were doing. Because they were, they had no training. They don't do personal security training. They don't do any of that kind of stuff. So if you're not going to tell them what they have to do, then they're going to revert to what they think they do, which is, in a riot situation, they'd get to high ground and they'd look into the crowd for, somebody potentially pulling a gun out or something like that. Well, you understand how ridiculous that is? And it was only because they're not trained to do it. They don't know that. Then they're supposed to get guidance from the Secret Service as to what to do. And the Secret Service is just, either because they're fucking stupid or they're corrupt.
Or arrogant. Yeah, or corrupt.
They're always arrogant. When I was at the first Gulf War, I ended up getting picked to be one of two parade OICs for the Welcome Home Parade in DC and in New York. That was a rodeo, I'll tell you that. That was interesting. So I'm working with a high-ranking civilian, and you can't even imagine the number of moving pieces for that, right? And a Secret Service guy comes to talk to me because I'm the OIC on the ground. I outranked the Marine that I was with. And the Secret Service guy comes up and he wouldn't speak to me. He spoke to another Secret Service agent who would then speak to me. And I would ask a question looking at the other guy and he would not address it until the other guy told him what I just said. I was like, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Seriously? Are you kidding me? It's like, what are you doing? Like, you're not looking at me. I mean, I have to ask you a question through this guy and he's got to tell you, and then you can hear it suddenly and it back forth. That's how it worked. I'm not kidding you. I'm not making that up. I was stunned. I mean, I did not know how to process the arrogance of that. And, I walked back and I was just shaking my head and I was talking to the civilian guy. I was like, he goes, yeah, that's how they are. He goes, that's how they are. They really think of themselves in that way. Well, I'll tell you what, people in the United States are not going to think of you in that way now. And it's unfortunate because I'm sure that there are a lot of really, really good Secret Service agents, Yeah. But unfortunately, it seems that all federal agencies can be corrupted from the top down,
Well, any final words before we descend into doom?
Yeah. Look, being 70 years old today, I can say that I can look back over, at least 65 of those years in some frame of awareness of what was going on in the world. And certainly in the last 60 years, 55 years, right? However you want to look at it, even being a dumbass, teenager, I have seen us cycle in and out of darkness as a people and as a country. I have seen us murder presidents or try to murder presidents. And I have watched us sink to very low points. And then there seems to be an indomitable spirit within Americans that we get to a place where we will just almost on a collective reach this critical mass of enough is enough, right? And then we stop letting the stupid shit happen. And when we do that, we enter a rebuilding phase and a sustaining phase of our global, of our collective society, right? Mm-hmm. And then, inevitably there becomes this unraveling and then a destructive phase. And we have been unraveling and we've been in a destructive phase now as the fourth turning. We've been there for almost 40 years now. 35 easy. 30 years easy, I guess. It's always a blur about when unraveling becomes destructive, but man, we are in destructive. And this destructive phase is, you look at certain parts of it and you think, God, how much worse can it get? And it can get much worse. And then you look back, like if you've lived as long as I have, you look backwards and you start to recall things that you saw happening, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and you go, it was really bad then too. And yet we brought ourselves out of it. Because we do, as a people, we reach these points of insanity where we're being driven by, pseudo-intellectual, elites with a socialist agenda that drive us into something. And then we get to this point of like, yeah, no more. You're not going to do it, which is one of the things why you start to see that getting more aggressive and more aggressive and more aggressive and more aggressive. And
it's a sign of weakness. It's a sign of weakness.
Out of fear, it becomes more aggressive, becomes more violent. But the things that you're seeing today, like 2 assassination attempts on a former president, and in that Secret Service, so it appears.
It's a soft coup with the current president, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you have members of the administration standing up and saying, somebody's got to put a in Donald Trump. Well, and then you wonder why some distorted, woke little 13-year-old or 20-year-old rather, whose daddy is a counselor and buys him, his daddy is a 350-pound counselor, therapist or something like that, buys his son a weapon and then puts it in his name. And he's 20 years old, and where the son is working he's kitchen help in a nursing home, a 20-year-old. So, okay. Now, I know that's the gun control folks are going to say, well, that's something we should be addressing. Well, yeah, how you address that is you take parents who do things like that, because parents should know that the son is probably, doesn't need that kind of a weapon. He's kitchen help in a nursing home at 20 years of age. Okay? Been a problem child all his life, difficulties. You don't give a child like that a 5.56. That's a parental thing. And if you start prosecuting parents that do shit like that, I think you'll probably start to find that kids like that won't get weapons very easily. Oh yeah, he could go, apply for it himself, but in this particular case, it was handed to him. So, in fact, in almost every case of those kinds of things, it's been handed to him. But anyway, the last words is I've seen this I've seen us cycle through this before. In fact, a number of times before on different scales of intensity. And while it is bad now, and we are all disheartened in a lot of ways, you can feel the collective whole saying, no more, just
enough.
Okay. We thought this would seek its own level somewhere, and it just hasn't. It's like it just gets worse and worse. So we're, as I've said many times on the show here and others, that we were looking around, you look at young people, and it's like you're just focused on the wrong things. I mean, you're chasing after the wrong things. You're bitching and moaning and up in arms about NSA and what NSA is doing, in terms of looking at data. And NSA is not selling your data, and NSA is not doing something for profit. They're trying to make sure that nobody's here to kill you. That's what they're trying to do. And it may be
the problem with NSA is they're collecting everything. And even if the NSA is of the purest intentions, you have like some wackadoodle take control and they start weaponizing that information against Americans.
Yeah, but so is Amazon, and so is Google. And so is Verizon, so is everything else. And they're doing it for profit. Absolutely for profit. And because it's profit driven and they're freaking greedy, they are truly mining at the speed of light, and they are, and as quick as they can get it, they're selling it. And they're selling you. We are the commodity. That's nothing new. That's now become a cliche, I guess. But, rather than protesting the NSA and saying, fuck the NSA, how about you go protest Amazon or Google or Facebook or something like that? How about you get pissed off about that? But no. So we're, again, that's being worried about the wrong things. Because
they're victimizing the bad guys, David. That's why.
Yeah, of course.
The bad guys. Right.
And it's, when Google and Facebook have the ability to shut down people's ability to look up information, like, after the assassination attempt, Google was announcing, as was Facebook, that the assassination attempt was fake and that he wasn't shot, and that, and they denied people's ability to just quite simply look it up.
Ask the question. Yeah.
Ask the question and find something out about it. And they shut that down. When we are living in a society where we're allowing that to happen, it's a good damn thing you and I weren't president, because, my first thing would be, hey, Google, you do that again, and you won't be working here anymore.
Well, you just revoke they have like some sort of special status where they can't be held accountable for things on their platform, which is fine. I think that's a good thing, provided you don't censor legal speech on your platform. I get porn, I get, other crazy.
Yeah, but they don't censor porn. And they don't censor pornography, and they don't censor any of those kinds of things. You can go on Google and type in whatever porn site you want, and it opens.
I'm talking more YouTube, but it's which is owned by Google.
Because unless you have an ability to have a special way for adults to get into that, I guess. But when you just start censoring very clearly just anything that you don't happen to agree with from a political perspective, or which is really what it is. When you start doing that, then you have stepped over a line that you shouldn't be allowed to step over. You're a platform that you entice people to use, and you mine and sell their data, and then you turn around and decide that you're the people that are going to censor what they're told. You're going to decide what's real or what's fake. You're going to decide that. And that's not the way that should operate. And I'm sure that the government, should they choose to, eventually, if the leadership is correct, will be capable of turning around and at least taking steps to stop that.
Well, I mean, they participated in it. They participated in the last election. Remember Elvis Chan, right?
Yeah.
Where they told people, this joke, we don't find that funny. We find that very disruptive. And it'd be a really good idea, Facebook, for you to take down this post. They're doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
No consequences, no repercussions,
Yeah.
nothing. So anyway, thank you very much, my friend. As always.
Hey, man, I love you, Sean, and I love your show and your listeners. And I'm always honored that you asked me to come back and ramble on about various things. I know we cover a wide spectrum of stuff, but that's what makes it fun, I think.
All right, brother. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Bye, man.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of a expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.